Hi, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Hannah from the book Copy and Paste Painting. What I want to show you today is just basic things that's applicable on every single artwork that you have in your book. So it's basic things. I'm not going to explain every single one in detail and all that. We've done the protea. You've seen the time-lapse video of the VW. So today what I've decided is I'm going to work with Frieda Kahlo, very famous Mexican artist. What I want to do just to explain basic things that's applicable to every single sheet that you have in this book. Okay, I've showed you how to stretch the canvas in a previous clip. I've showed you the protea in detail, sort of step by step. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to be working in oil, not in like I did with the previous videos. I've done the lines and that I've done in acrylic. You can still do that, but with this one I just want to show you that you can actually do the lines and that in oil as well. So, but with Frieda, my advice would be to start with plotting out the background. You will see that on your grayscale print, the edge of Frieda's face here doesn't really show up that well because there's no line there. But that is, you just have to look very carefully how you can get the edge of Frieda's face. Now there's one trick that I want to show you quickly. Now your print and your grayscale is exactly the same size if you measure from above her eye straight there. You'll see that the print and your color copy is exactly the same size. So you can just basically take a ruler or a pencil and have a point of reference there where you can see her cheekbone is from over there to where the black is on her. And so I'm just going to make a little dot there just to indicate the cheekbone. For this, just underneath her nose, I'm going to make another point of reference there. Just to her ear. So just where that dark spot is in her ear, touching under her nose, over there, I would put another marker. Doesn't look right. Do that again, underneath the nose, there by the ear, just underneath the nose, just a little bit out here. Okay, and then the same here where the mouth is, I'll just measure from the earring to the edge of her, in the middle of her mouth there, touching the earring, and I'll make another little guide, just a dot there, and then just maybe to do the chin part here, I'll go underneath the earring and say in the middle where it's touching, there it's touching in the middle of the earring. Over there is another spot. So now you can very lightly with your pencil just follow some of those guide lines or dots that you've made, just so that you can plot where the edge of her face is. Okay, so that done. What I have here is just a short bristle brush. It's a bit hard, it's worked quite well. So I do have my turpentine, my artist turpentine that I'll be using, and I'm gonna go with a burnt umber, and I'm gonna mix my artist turps in there. You want to get it flowy but not runny. Okay, dab off any excess paint onto one of your old cloths. So you are basically again just going to sketch the lines, or some of the lines in here, like that. Okay. The point is that with every print that you have and with every sheet that you have, your basic thing is still the same. Whether you're going to be doing the boat or the street scene or Frieda or the Protea, is to first sketch those lines and then apply base colors. That is what every single one of these projects involve. The principle with all of them stay the same. Just what I want to add here with the Frieda, they are extremely fine little lines that you're going to be working with. So you are going to need a round tip, small round tip brush to do all those little black lines there. Also in the hair, on your grayscale print, if you actually follow the darkest parts of the grey and you look at the hair and you start putting that in with a finer brush, you're already creating the effect of the hair, and you won't lose the grayscale print where it's really dark, the grey is darker. So that it just makes it a little bit more easier with, especially with Frieda, that when you do the outlines and that you will use a brush suitable to you. I can work with a thick brush. You might find it really difficult to work with a thick brush. So I do suggest that you find a brush that is suitable and that you feel comfortable with. Here I have two round small brushes that I'll be using for the smaller detail. Like you can see, I'm working thin, and you must be careful not to touch too much on your oil black lines, especially when you work with the yellow. So I want to do a base color for the face and that. I can carry on with the flowers and everything, but I first want this to dry just a little bit because I'm scared that I'm going to get that intermixing of the colors. If you work very light with your oil paint, you should not have a problem to actually go over with some base colors on the flowers and that. But it's such fine work, and over there, that if I go over with a base color, I'm going to smudge that because I've done it in oil. So I just want to give it some time to dry before I carry on. Okay, now I've waited for my colors to dry here, that I can now work with my base colors over that. I'm going to be doing the face in the base colors now. I'm going to be mixing a few colors here to get your skin tones. What I have on my palette, I've just used the palette from yesterday. It's oil running. I've got a yellow ochre, I've got a alizarin crimson, I've got a bright orange there, 2 blobs of white, I've got my brown, my burnt umber, my Payne's grey, burnt sienna, and I'm going to be mixing those. Good idea, there is a color called Naples Yellow. Now to mix Naples Yellow is to mix your white with a little bit of the yellow ochre, and then you get a color that is very close to Naples Yellow. Naples Yellow is just like almost like a beigey color, so that makes for a nice sort of just for skin tones. It makes a really nice color. So if I do that, I want to show you my palette without this oil running down here. I've mixed it over there. That is sort of the color that you are looking for to use as a base color. Now I say a base color, okay, then with your base color you can add your burnt sienna to your base color to make it a bit darker, where you get your darker tones, and then you will also see in your original print here that there's a tiny bit of, it looks more like pink. So I'm using a alizarin crimson, mixing that into it, into my base color that I have done here. So I've just mixed a little bit of the alizarin crimson into that. I've mixed a little bit of burnt sienna into that, and where it's more orange, then I will take a bit of the orange, and it might be too much, and mix that into that to get a more orangey color. Okay, so that, and then of course your white, you can just, to make this lighter, you just add your white. If you also want to make it a bit darker, you can use your burnt umber to get a darker brown color. I always like to add a bit of color to that, because it can become very dull if you just use a brown. So I've just mixed in a little bit of the alizarin crimson. Now I'm going to start applying. I'm going to start working in the dark areas first, and then I'm going to go on to the lighter shades. This is only still a base color, so I want to use I'm going to use a bit of my oil paint medium, because I want this to dry quickly. Okay, so let's do that. So that gives you an idea of how the blending works. I've applied paint. I've started with the darks, and I went to the lights and the midtones, and then I've got these very well worked brushes that I've been using for quite some time, and you can see they're really well worked. The bristles are almost, they're scattered all over the place. And when you do your blending, when you work in a color, I have my kitchen towel paper, and I keep on rubbing the excess paint off. So, but that gives you a basic idea of the basic colors. I'm not going to do the lips now. The lips is when it's red, or when I do the flowers, I'm going to do that. And then we'll get back to the detail of the eyes and the detail on the necklace and all this. Remember, this is still your first layer. You're still going to be working over this, but that's a nice base for your flesh tones for Frieda. I'm gonna carry on with the flowers and everything else that's in red. What I've done is I've added to my palette the orange, I've added a cadmium red and a cadmium yellow to complete the flowers. I still have a little bit of the alizarin crimson on my palette as well. So I'm not really using a lot of white, and don't worry about putting the whites in now, because that will be your last step. You always work from the darkest colors to the lightest colors. First get the deep darks in, that's the shadows, that pulls it back. The highlights make it stand out, your lighter colors. So I've just added that to my palette. I'm going to carry on with my flowers. Okay, so now I have done a bit of the flowers. There's still a few open spots there. I still need to add those greens in there. I didn't have the right colors on my palette to get to that green. Now everything is sort of wet, except for the background from yesterday is still a bit wet. Now the only thing that you can do now, this is not completely dry yet, the base color, but you can carry on with the blues and the purples and the dark. You're going to use a black or a Payne's grey to get the drapery, her shawl or whatever she's wearing. There's a lot of blues in the hair as well. I have done a little bit darker, and I've gone with a little bit of blue in the hair, and I've just touched up the eyes. But now you're at that stage where everything is wet. You have to wait for it to dry so that you can proceed with the next step. Frieda is dry now, still a little bit sticky from where I worked before, but yeah, with my base color it's dry, and my rendering on the skin tones are dry. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to finish the background completely so that I can work on the portrait itself. The important thing about doing your background first is that you don't want to work here and then afterwards come and then you have to work in between here to get your background in. Then you need your background, and then you need to put your flowers over your background. So that is the reason for that. So I've done a bit of my preparation for my palette here. I've added a few colors. So this is my palette. It's always messy, but I try to sort of keep it organized. These are still some of the skin tones that I mixed yesterday, and I've got a alizarin crimson, a permanent crimson lake. I've got my cadmium orange, like a orange cadmium red. This is a very, very nice color. Brilliant rose. I've got yellow ochre. I've got a cadmium yellow. I've got a permanent green light over here. I've got my blob of white. I've added a bit of cobalt blue, and then I have a dioxide violet, and I've got that cobalt violet there. And then of course my Payne's grey, my burnt sienna, and a burnt umber. So, and I've got my palette knife for mixing, I've got my rag, I've got my tissue paper, and I've got a selection of brushes that I'm going to be using for this. Because we're going to do the background first, I'm going to use this flat slanted brush. It's quite broad, but that will just make it quicker. Now, if you just look at your color on the color copy, you'll see that it's not just yellow. Look, this was very shocking yellow that I put on for the base color. But now I'm going to work in a bit of burnt siennas, and I'm going to work in a bit of the the yellow ochres to get that sort of darker yellow there, and then go into my lighter yellows over here. And don't forget that little piece there behind the ear and her hair. So I want to do the background, and then we're going to start by going back to the colors in the face, doing a darker, and we're going to finish the shirt over here. Done the background, it's very wet, and what I've got here that I mixed in a little lid was like half artist linseed oil and the oil paint medium, which I mixed into the colors when I was doing this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the darks again on the eyes and all the dark lines here, just to enhance that. And I first want to do that before I paint over here, because if I need to press with my hand on the canvas itself, I don't want to get paint all over myself. There is another trick that you can do, is if you take a brush and press there, and you can keep your hand steady when you have to draw the black lines in where all the dogs are over there. So very handy to have this. If like, oops, see, it's wet there now, so I don't want to touch there. You can also press on an area where it's already dry, and this helps to stabilize your hand. So I'm gonna do the dogs now. Now I've added some of the darker lines again in there, a little bit in the hair, and I've completed her jacket, and I've also worked a little bit on the necklace there. What I want to do now is I'm going to go with a second layer onto the skin tone. Just make sure that it's dry, and now it sort of starts getting a little bit more difficult, where you have to really look at your colors and where your shadows are. The darker colors, the more pinks, the more a little bit burnt sienna, burnt umber there, a burnt umber, and so that we can get the contrast in. This is still very pinkish to me, but now also you have to be really careful now, because you've worked on your dark lines, is not to touch on the dark lines. If you don't want to risk that, then I suggest that you leave this for now and then maybe carry on some of the flowers and sort of almost complete the flowers. We also need to still work on the hair, but so far so good. I like it.